What's going on, everybody? Gar Hoover here. As you can probably tell, I'm in a new space. My wife and I recently moved, and that's a big reason why I haven't been making as many videos. But I'm happy to tell you all that I will be jumping back into things as it used to be. And I recently released a track, Send It, which was made on the PO-33, and that's what we're going to be going through today. If you have yet to hear the track Send It, you can check it out up here or in the description. Also, if you want to download the samples that I used for the track, you can check those out in the description too. They're completely free. Use them however you want. Now, Send It is kind of like a glitch hop track, kind of funky, space funk, I guess. That's what people wanted on Instagram when I took a poll, so this is my best attempt at that. It's a pretty fun track, and I'm really excited to go through it with you all, so let's get started. As you all can probably tell, new environment, using this new coffee table and stuff instead. I don't have an office or a studio set up yet. I'm planning on getting to that when we finish our basement, but until then, this will be kind of how it looks. Also, I'm recording this live using a microphone. This isn't how I normally do it. I used to overdub all of my videos in iMovie so that it was a lot more professional sounding and all that, but it took up so much time, and I don't have time for that right now, and it's just going to make me really burned out. And I didn't look forward to doing tutorials, but I feel like doing this will be a lot easier for me. It'll be faster, and I'll be able to make more tutorials more often. So let's get started looking at those samples. Got a classic Moog bass, fun acid tone. All these are coming from Massive, and now I've just got a bunch of wubs. Kind of like a pluck wub, rubber band wub, chorusy wub, kind of like a trap lead sound there. And if we go to our drums section, got my horns in here. These I sampled from Logic. They have a great kind of mini samplers. And I got my drum kit. Love 909 hats. Always so energetic. Got these 8-bit chords that are the same MIDI that I use for the horns. I just moved it over to this 8-bit sound I made in Massive. And then I have these weird transitional sounds. These I just use during the drop to kind of help lend to the more dubsteppy vibes.
Still gonna send it? Guys silly?
And I have my 2 vocal chops that I use. And then I have this crash that helps serve as a transition for the build. And now let's take a look at the verses. Okay, so let's check out the intro to the verses. So what you hear right off the bat are those horns, and these horns carry out throughout the rest of the verse. It's kind of got a funky rhythm, but they kind of are pretty simple though. If you look at it, 2 hits right there on the 1 and the 5, and then we change chords here on the 9. So it's still pretty structured, that it's changing kind of every bar pretty clean. And it kind of gets that cool, funky, long triplet feel with it going 9, 12, 15. If you're ever looking for a kind of funky rhythm, including something like this will always be perfect for you. And I keep it doing the same rhythm as the chords change, but on the second one here, where we go to the 3rd chord, we see it's doubling twice just to add a little bit more intrigue. Because when you loop around a track or one of these patterns, you got to have some ear candy, something that's different for each pattern, or else your ear can get really tired, especially when you have to try and make 16 tracks into a full song. And then the final chord, similar rhythm to the first pattern that we looked at. So that's all it is for that. And as you can see, we just have a snare going. Kind of letting people know what vibe we're going for right off the bat, because if you just heard those horns, you might not know what style it's going to be, but when you have kind of that kind of like trappy snare, you're like, oh, okay, I know what we're getting into here. And so if we look at the verse, Horns are the exact same, don't need to go over those. Drums pick up a little bit. We have our kicks here. Always I layer my kicks with a hi-hat, and you can hear that with my snares as well. They have layered hi-hats with them, and that makes it so I only need one drum track for all, so then I can have 3 other tracks going and it still has a full sound to it. Let me show you guys what I mean here. So this is my hi-hats, and I have those where it's no longer a kick or a snare, but it still sounds like there's a hi-hat hitting with the kicks and the snare, like it's a steady groove. And that's really the key there, is when you have those layered hi-hats on the kicks and the snares, you get that full drum kit sound and it sounds amazing. To add a little funk to it, I throw this one in. I've got my swing on as well. How you access swing is when you hold down BPM, and you can twist this knob, and I usually have it on like S4 or S5, swing 5, swing 4, something like that. So what it's going to do is swing these two, second column and the fourth column. Those are going to be the ones that mainly are getting shifted backwards. So you feel this, because this feels pretty straight, but then when you have this one in there, it really does add that swing feel to it. And then on that second pattern, I have a snare hit here, and then I have another one at the end, so that it helps loop it around or helps transition it to the next section. Now let's take a look at that bass line. Bass line's busy, bass line's keeping it funky. I'm walking around the chords here. So I'm jumping up an octave, but notice it's not ringing out when I hit it. I have it tight. What I'm doing is I'm shortening the length of the sample with this right here. If you hold down the button, whichever pattern, or not pattern, excuse me, whatever step you have selected, and you can turn your right knob and you can adjust the length nice and clean, so that ends right after that step, whichever one you have selected. So that keeps this bass line funky and it's not drowning on. And I have it just kind of walking around nice and clean, following, as you can tell, the horns. The horns hit at the same spots, except we have the bass here where it's coming back down, where it's kind of standing out on its own. And the second one, look, once again, following the horns, the double hit there, and then to this one, and then here and here. And this is the only outlier of not hitting with the horns. But it's keeping everything tight, and it's keeping it kind of funky too. Because when it goes and it hits without the horns, it stands out. It makes it more obvious. And it's constantly walking around. I'm never keeping it just on the root of the chord. I'm always walking. You gotta figure out what the chord is, right? Let's say we're focusing on that first chord. That's the octave. And then you want to add in the fifth. That's the fifth. And then if you want to do the third, which in this case is a minor third, you could go even higher. Or you could go, that's the seventh. So that makes it interesting if you're trying to do something with more jazzy chords. All that to say, I always love walking bass lines, especially in my music, especially on a pocket operator. It keeps things interesting. As I was mentioning, the ear candy is essential. So here we've got that acid kind of tone going. Clearly not an acid line at all, but it's still fun. It's kind of plucky. It's doing its thing. It's just... It's clearly up higher. That's all we're doing there. But you can hear movement in that, because even though it's looping around, we hear that it's kind of phasing almost. What I'm doing is adjusting the filter on the fly. So check this out. If I hold down right while I'm twisting the filter knob, see how it says high pass? What I'm doing is adjusting the high pass. Let's make sure we've got really obvious, really peaking resonance for this, and we can show it real quick. Sounds terrible, but you get the point. I held down right and I wrote it in. And so that's how I get it to kind of have that movement, and it loops around fine. And after that, you can hear the snare hit changes a little bit on the drums here. Similar rhythms, once again, snare, snare. We have it hitting, instead of just on 16, it's also hitting on 15. So this lets us know not only is this it's not just looping around, this is going to serve as a transition to something that's about to grow to even higher dynamic in the song. And in that case, that's the build, which we're going to look at next. Alright, so now let's actually take a look at the build itself, which normally is over 4 patterns. If you watch any of my other videos, I usually save this second row right here for my build. But for this one, I actually made it 2 patterns. So it's a really short build, but it's effective in its purpose.
Still gonna send it.
And that's all it is. Very simple build. Let me just show you guys what happened here. First off, you can hear that the horn, I have it starting with the same note. And that's similar to saying like, oh, the horn is going to keep playing throughout the verse, but then when we get to this section, we expect the horn to behave normally again, but instead it starts to go up in pitch. And that kind of lets our ear know, oh, we're about to hit some type of big drop or something like that. And you can hear it's just going up half step every single time. But you can't do that by using, see, you can't adjust the pitch easily like you would with the melodic blank where this becomes a scale. So what you have to do is change it to tone, and you go first note right, punch it in, and then you adjust it, and then you punch it in. You adjust it, and then you punch it in, and you do that until you fill in all of the notes that you want. Now it's extremely tedious, but you get great results. Great build tone to it. And then you can hear on the second one, there's a point where I hit the absolute max. I couldn't bring up the pitch any higher. And what that causes, hit it like that high up. And you can also hear I have a filter on it. And so what I do when I hit the absolute peak and I can't bring the pitch any higher for a sample is I throw on a high pass filter to kind of help contribute to the energy and let it continue on. And you can hear that in this second row especially. I held down right and I just turned up the high pass filter. So it adds to that energy. The other major piece that we hear is the snare. Let me show you guys. So you can hear it's hitting on every single one, but it doesn't sound as abrupt as you would anticipate it would. And that's because I've adjusted the volume of these second rows. So these are what are really standing out. These would be the accent hits, and then these are kind of like a ghost note. You can hear the difference. You hear that one's slightly quieter. What I did was I punched in each one of these with its proper pitch. As you can hear, there's a subtlety there. It's that same thing where you adjust the tone, hit right, and then punch it back in. Very tedious process, just like with the horns. But then I took it to another level of tediousness by adjusting the volume of these second ones. And how you do that is select the tone. Okay, so we have that already programmed, which is right here. And then we adjust the volume down, and then we punch it in. And then we do that for each one of these. So then it creates this alternating feel that's not intense, but it's still contributing to the build. And when we get to the second part of the build, I don't have the volume adjust at all. So these are at full send, and that really helps add to the energy. And as you can tell, the swing is playing a key factor too in making this not just a standard EDM build, but it's really adding to the funkiness of it. And the swing is accenting, as I've said before, the second vertical row and the fourth vertical row. And it's shifting those back. So not only are these notes quieter, but they're being shifted. So there's even more emphasis going on. And so that's really that for the drums. And you can hear as well, I have that one cymbal. That crash, that lets us know this is another transition. Get ready for it. And then
Still gonna send it.
I have just that little sample. I didn't have
Still
to
gonna send it.
cut it or chop it or make it so it fits with the rhythm at all, which was great. I just hit play.
Still gonna send it.
And just punched it in right there.
Still gonna send it.
And it worked out perfectly. And then that just leads right into the chorus, which we're going to take a look at next. Time to take a look at the chorus, but the chorus, as you know, is pretty complicated, so we're actually just going to take it in chunks, and we're going to listen to the first section. That's all we're going to look at right here for this part, because as you can hear, there's a lot going on. This is a very intensive. If I hold down sound, you'll see all the different stuff that's firing off. As you can see, all those different lights means that one of those sound banks is being used in that pattern at that time. It's crazy. This took me a while, but it was a lot of fun at the same time. Let's start with the easiest thing, probably the drums. So I just put a steady kick on 1 and 9. So that would be the 1 and the 3 of the measure. And then just a nice weird kind of has a weird fizzle on the end. That snare sounds really fun. And then we've got the hi-hats again. That are kind of just driving along as normal. But we also have these weird laser sounds that I have, these little click lasers that kind of contribute to the chaos that's taking place if you hear it within the mix. So the drums are really simple, which is great. Just the standard kick, snare, back and forth, and then the hi-hats filling in, and then these weird lasers, because the rest of it is pure chaos, and it really just kind of keeps it grounded. We needed some piece of it that was normal. So let's take a look at the chords next, because the chords are driving this whole chorus the entire time. You hear them in every section. So as you can hear, that really holds out long, and this is nothing. This is a choke. That's what it is you can't even hear it as a sample. And so what I do is I shrink a portion. If I go to trim, I make it as small as it can go and to the very end of the sample where there's just dead air, and that's my new choke. So I can have a chord go as short as I want it, or I can hold it out and I'll be good to go. So in this case, it's stopping it so it only goes 2 steps. And that really helps kind of add to the funkiness of it. That stuff's not holding out, it's kind of just driving along. You can hear also that I've kind of changed the chord progression a little bit, at least where the chords are hitting necessarily. Now, you can hear that the other sounds, the wubs and things, carry on in the same fashion as how the horns were, where the chords changed at 1 and 9. But the actual video game chords here are hitting in different spots, so it's kind of adding a different emphasis to the rhythm. And you can hear too that these are only tiny glitches of the full chord. That when I loaded it in the pocket operator chopped it up kind of weird, and I just went with it because it helped contribute to the funkiness and the strangeness of this drop. Same rhythm. And then, so that's a pretty long hold, and we have two more of those glitchy kind of sounds. That's all it's doing. So those are the chords for this section. Really fun stuff. I love, once again, using kind of old 8-bit kind of tones, especially in glitch hop. Works perfectly. So now let's take a look at all of the other sounds that are taking place in this. So we hear first off this kind of pluck. I don't know what else to call it. We'll just call it a pluck taking place. It's really simple. Once again, it's just there. You can hear it playing alongside another sound, but once again, I'm just kind of filling in. These might sound very simple at first when you just hear them independent of each other, and it's like, wow, how does that even work or become something fascinating or interesting for the ear? But it does. They aren't even doing some form of distinct melody. Most of these notes are just staying on the root of the chord. It's just that there are different tonalities really make it interesting. So that's kind of what's going on here, is just, and then in the second half, that's all that rhythm is for that little pluck. And then another sound here right off the bat at the start, which I really wanted to showcase because I love kind of weird digital yoy sounds. So I just had it trigger 4 times. And it sounds great. And the key with all of these is, how can I get all of these samples to play at once without taking control of all 4 of the tracks? Because on the pocket operators, you have 4 sounds that can play at once. And if you have 5, one of the sounds, usually a drum track, gets cut off. And so if I had too much going on in the melodic section, that would be bad for my drums. My drums would get muted and the melodic track would take the priority. So what I do with every single one of these in this chorus especially is make sure that they are only the length of one sequence, or one step of a sequence. So they're only shining for the illuminated step, and they aren't carrying on to hog more space than they should. And I think that's really it for this yoy sound. I don't really use it anywhere else in the chorus, honestly. But it stands out great, and I love it a lot. You hear this in the first section as well. So once again, this one is actually holding out a little longer. It's holding out longer because it blended really well with that other hit sound, that pluck that we were talking about, because that's going at the same time. So I actually have 2 different bass sounds layered together for this section just to add a little bit of intrigue. Because if you look at this first one, and we're back at that rubber band bass, I have it playing and then I have it triggering again, I think 4 steps later on in this next pattern. I don't want it to sound exactly the same. That's not going to be interesting to the ear. So that's what's going on there with all the oddness with the with this rubber band bass. You can also hear this chorusy one taking place. That's all it's doing, but remember, it's not being held out. It's going to be cut off. You can hear that right as the snare hits, it gets cut off immediately. Sounds really tight, sounds great. And you can hear it taking place in this pattern as well. Oh, I guess not, excuse me. And what you do hear though is one of our transitional sounds. And I'm making sure that only plays 4 steps too. How I did that was just making sure that when I created the samples that they were at the same tempo as I intended for the pocket operator, which was 108. So I knew that it was only gonna go the length of a quarter note, and if I put it in the pocket operator it would be the same length and then it would cut off clean. And so that's all I did. That's all I did with that sample. Very simple. It works great. You can also hear, I didn't point this out on the drums, excuse me, this little kind of sad bell sound. Kind of just adding to more of that texture and character. And then if we look at the next section, which kind of transitions interesting, let's... So you can hear we've got let's stay on the drum kit because we've got the hi-hats, we've got those 909 hi-hats going. And then on the 2 vertical rows, 2 and 4, just hi-hats that are closed hi-hats. We've got the open hi-hat and then the closed. And that's just keeping the open hi-hat from just ringing out too long. It's kind of adding energy, having a constant hit take place between the kicks and the snares. And you can also hear in this section we've got this wub sound. Let me get it. This one is the showcase sound for this section. We have that small pluck that's taking place, which we had at the beginning of the other pattern, but when we look at this wub sound by itself, it's really nothing special. It's doing one note and just kind of has a semi-interesting rhythm, but once again, what adds this evolving characteristic was that I was adjusting the high-pass filter and twisting it as it was playing. As you can hear, it's going upwards. I'm pulling it up, and that kind of adds to the energy. And to make this pattern more interesting, when I do it a second time, instead of looping through it over and over and over, I have that second version of it, which is that other glitch sound that we hear here. Once again, same length as, so it carries out for a whole quarter note and then it cuts off clean. But we have that snare hit that's taking place at the same time. That kind of makes it sound cool and energetic. And then we have the final one. So when you punch this in, it goes the original, alternate, original, and then it goes over here to the other alternate, which is
Hey, silly?
the same as.
Hey, silly?
But you can hear a few differences. First off, the drums are the exact same as the rest of this section. It's got those hi-hats taking place, and then we have that vocal chop.
Hey, silly?
That's taking place as well. That just adds, once again, a little bit more energy and intrigue. It continues on with the quote from what I took.
Hey, silly?
And it works great for looping back around as well. So if we look at this final section of the chorus, I have to do the same thing. It has the alternates that are taking place. So as you can hear, this is kind of keeping with that same hi-hat energy. If we look at the drums, still the exact same. Got the kick and the snare, and then we've got the hi-hats doing their thing. Closed hi-hats on vertical row 2 and 4, and then the third vertical row we've got that open 909 hat. And then for this final one, I remove them just so it kind of stands out and serves as a transitional piece, either to loop back around as it does the first time through, or to bring it back to the beginning of the song. So that's it for the drums, and then we have, this is our bass for this section, just this, it's just on the third note going with the third vertical row, going with the 909 hi-hat. But instead of having it ring out the whole time, I'm only having it go the length of 2 steps. Once again, holding down whichever note I want, and I'm twisting it so that it says length 2 sequences, or 2 steps. It's keeping it tight. So it's just following the chord progression. And the nice part is as well, we've got the same chords going on. Those are the same chords that we've heard for the first part of the chorus that we looked at up here. So for these, each one of these sections, they're different, but there's still familiar aspects to it, so that it keeps everything feeling together, but at the same time keeping your ear interested. And then you have that lead line. Very, very simple lead line, but it works, it loops around nice. And it's kind of working within the pentatonic scale, which is, or minor pentatonic, I should say. And I can show this to you guys real quick. That's your minor pentatonic on the pocket operator, if you're looking for it. So it uses 13, 15, 16, 9, 11, and then that pattern repeats itself up here for the octave of it. So it goes 5, 7, 8, 1, 2, or 1, 3, excuse me. So if you're ever looking to jam over blues or funk or something, these are great opportunities to use this scale specifically. And then it changes that line a little bit for that final version, but then that also serves to loop around or transition. And that's going to do it for today's tutorial, guys. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, please like and subscribe. If you guys have any questions or comments, please leave them down in the comment section below. I answer every single one of the questions I get sent, so you will not be ignored. I'll be happy to help you through making music on the pocket operators. If you're interested in any other tutorials, I have my different playlists here, one for tutorials and one for pocket operators. I hope you all have a great rest of your week. See ya.